So this is Rock Our World back again with part 2 of this, I think probably a radio interview with the author of a book called Planet X. And we'll finish this up for you, and then in a third episode I'll come back and give my thoughts and opinions on the whole thing.
He's got probably about 1,000 different pictures that he's been given from people all over the world. But a lot of them I look at and I say, yeah, that might be lens flare. I don't know what that is. But a few of them in particular that he showed, a couple of them that I'm thinking of in specific, and I'll pull these up here in a moment if I can find them. They were like, it was in Italy, and it was just this giant red circular mass. And it almost looks like, okay, well, is that the sun, but somebody used some type of filtering software to make it look like that big giant red mass? But it sounds to me like Nibiru, possibly.
Right. I know the individual you're referring to, and he is a superb investigator with an excellent reputation and track record. So I would guess that, as you say, most of his photographs are quite genuine. And I think we've had the best photographs since about 2010, 2011. We've had superb photographs and videos in 2015. It's getting larger. I think a fellow named...
yeah, it's huge. I mean, these pictures, David, I'm telling you, it takes up half the sky in that particular area of the picture. I mean, it's mind-boggling.
Yes, there was a series of still photographs taken between, I believe, 2011 and 2014 by a certain analyst who had access to a webcam at the top of a volcano in Central America. Perhaps it was Costa Rica, and I looked at an analysis of that, those still photos. And if you look at the field of view and if you state the pixel size at each year, 2010, 2011, up through 2014, in the same field of view, it gets amazingly larger. So obviously, in my opinion, the object is approaching us quite quickly.
You're saying that you think it's right now in between Jupiter and Mars.
Right, absolutely. And I believe, getting to one of the main points of my book for just a moment, not only is there a lot of scientific evidence, and again, you look at the circumstantial evidence, you look at these deep underground bunkers and the missing money and all of these things that don't make any sense unless you use a philosophical principle called Occam's razor. The simplest solution is the most reasonable and is the one you should use. Now, getting back for just 1 second, maybe I can even talk a little bit about John's very apparent description in Revelation 12. It's a very precise celestial event that he talks about. Now, I talked about one particular object, but I didn't really talk too much about what's called the Revelation 12 sign. And in the Revelation chapter 12, if you read the first 4 verses, you'll notice those are very specific visual descriptions that are not referenced again. And it's interesting to note that to an observer on Earth, they will not be able to see this formation. That on September 23rd, 2017, you won't be able to see it because the sun's brightness will clothe the entire constellation during the day, and the moon will, I think, only be illuminated about 11%. So it's a pure, specific astronomical indication. And if you look at Revelation 12, 1 and 3, the word wonder or sign is used to describe what John saw. Now, in the Greek, this has the idea of an indication. So it appears that they are based on literal visual events that the author of the Apocalypse, John, saw in the heavens or the sky as an indication of what was going on in the larger scheme of things. Now, that date itself is what I call a time marker or a key to a cryptogram. It is not the final key, in my opinion. It's only a preliminary key. That's not the date, in my opinion, when you're going to see Planet X in the sky. You're going to see it at the last possible minute, and I believe I know at least the month, but maybe not the week, but I do know the month when that will most likely probably occur. And again, the analysis comes from Revelation chapter 12. And the September 23rd celestial sign of the woman in the constellation Virgo, as I mentioned, has never happened before and will never happen again. Jupiter has to move in several directions in retrograde and so forth for a period of about 400 days in a part of that constellation to fulfill that exact astronomical requirement. And that, in conjunction with the 12 stars at the top of the woman's head and the moon at her feet and the sun and so forth, these things do not occur in exact sequence except in the month of September of 2017. So again, I would call that some sort of cryptographic key that we need to proceed from. Now, remember this, the blue daytime sky is going to hide planet X until it eclipses the sun. But there is going to be a full disk solar eclipse right after September 23rd, 2017. This occurs, if you look at moon charts, on October 5th, 2017. And what happens, of course, during a full disk solar eclipse is the sky turns black, and that will reveal at that point, that week, in my opinion, the week of October 5th to 12th, according, if the book of Revelation is true, because this ties in perfectly with it, that could well be the exact month that we can first see it with the naked eye. So, in my opinion, combined with a predictive computer-generated astronomical model, the Bible, the book of Revelation, the Apocalypse, tells us that the red dragon, or planet X, or Nibiru, appears after September 23rd, 17, but it has to appear before October 11th, 2017. At that date, October 11th, 2017, the sign in Virgo, the woman Virgo, will no longer be, quote, pregnant. Then the red dragon, or planet X, therefore must make it an appearance before October 11th. So that seems to be a cutoff date. Jupiter, which is known as the planet or the star of the Messiah, exits Virgo, the Virgin, on October 11th after having spent, I believe, 301 days or about 42 weeks in the, quote, womb region of that constellation. And again, after that point, the woman will no longer be pregnant. So that gives us a very narrow window, just to use the book of Revelation or the Apocalypse as sort of an intel briefing. And the great sign of the woman is described in Revelation 12, 1-2, forms and lasts for a few hours. And according, again, to astronomical models, this sign has never before occurred in human history. It will occur once on September 23rd, 27. It will never occur again. And I believe it places us right at the time frame from that analysis of the Planet X approach to the Earth. So I believe this is something very interesting that's covered in a lot of detail in the book. And I believe, though, if I'm not mistaken, the individual you just referenced, Bob, I believe he also believes that 2017 is highly likely.
You know, that's what he said in the interview. And, you know, he also correlated a lot of revelations and stuff. And it sounds to me like you've definitely done your homework. Are you a religious person?
Well, I would say yes.
Okay.
But I never really studied the book of Revelation.
Okay.
Until a few years ago, until I got into Planet X. First of all, it didn't make any sense to me. I've glanced at it once or twice, but it didn't seem to make it. Didn't seem to solve, as you would say in cryptography. So it made no sense until I started relating it to this particular object and correlating what the Bible calls the red dragon with also what is called wormwood. These are all terms referring to Planet X or Nibiru. They're all the same thing. The Vatican calls it wormwood. Revelation calls it the red dragon. Revelation chapter 8 again calls it wormwood, but these terms are interchangeable. So obviously this is a major astronomical sign that's going to have some very high impact value at a certain point in our history. You know, the Earth has been around many thousands of years, and everything's gone okay so far. And the end is not necessarily going to occur, but things are certainly going to change, and there's going to be major cataclysms. And the Earth is actually very cataclysmic in its nature. Only 500,000 years ago, there was a pole shift. 6 million years ago, there was a pole shift. 6 million years ago, understand, the state of Alaska was near the equator, what we now know as the equator. So 65 million years ago, as you know, there was a major asteroid collision near Mexico, and scientists say, well, that wiped out the dinosaurs because it caused ash to cover the sky and it destroyed plant and animal life. So we really live in a very cataclysmic universe. And the interesting thing about these asteroids that Planet X has a tail anywhere from 250,000 miles to several million miles long, and the dust of that planet is red iron oxide. But the tail, especially as it passes through the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, picks up a lot of asteroids, some large, some small, some kilometers in diameter. And these items, the U.S. and the world actually has nothing at all to protect against an asteroid collision. You can't shoot a nuclear weapon at it because all it would do is break it up into more pieces and you'd have more targets hitting the same area. There's no early warning system. There's no way really to protect against this.
Yeah, I mean, you'd almost have to find a way to send something that could move it, hook up some thruster system to it and have it blast off the opposite direction, because obviously inertia, yeah, you shoot a missile at it and then it's just going to be a million other pieces that are going to fire onto the Earth. So,
right, and that they haven't discovered that yet, to my knowledge. They're probably working on it, and they might have it in 50 years, but I don't think they have it yet.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Who knows what they have? So, how far before you think? I mean, do you think in 2017 it's going to be chaos on Earth? Do you think that it's basically going to be blowing up? Earthquakes 10 times more than they are now. What's going to happen a year from now?
Right. Well, at that point, I would prepare. Now, here's something very strange. I would prepare on or before the fall of 2017. I would conduct emergency preparedness. Of course, you want to be spiritually ready. You want to have a clear conscience and all that, but you need to do physical preparations as well. I think survival gear, emergency food, that sort of thing. And the reason is that, again, all this while, you're going to get increasing levels of disinformation from the mass media until it's actually there. And then they're going to say, whoops, we didn't have any notice, we don't know what happened, and so forth. And they're going to run and hide in what they've already established. But, the public is there, and the public has to fend for itself. This global warming, as you've heard, I'm sure, is a cover story. The Earth is heating up from the core outward because of the approach of Planet X. During the 20th century, I think there were 35 volcanic eruptions in a typical year. Now there are more than 35 of these every single day. So basically, when X approaches, that week you see it in the sky, let's say it's October of 2017, for purposes of discussion. At that point, it's not going to actually collide, I don't believe, with the Earth. The Earth is only 8,000 miles in diameter. It may have passed 5, 10, 15 million miles away, but it has a very high magnetic attraction. It's going to have a gravitronic effect. It's going to cause the shifting of the Earth's crust. It's going to cause major volcanic activity. It's going to cause tidal waves. And when a pole shift happens, the ocean literally comes up out of its base. So you're going to have major weather changes, seismic activity, and volcanic eruptions. Probably at that point, Yellowstone, the Yellowstone super caldera, will likely erupt. That could affect up to a third of the United States covered with ash. Right now you've got unexplained sinkholes, bizarre weather. So we've seen these core changes. And of course, the cover story, the legend that were given by, Al Gore and those types is global warming. Well, of course, that's just a total story, and it makes absolutely no logical or deductive sense.
Well, let me jump in here for a second. I'm glad you brought that up, because you can clearly tell a difference now with how hot the sun is. I mean, even if you look at the same temperature, 75 degrees now versus 75 degrees 10 years ago, although it's the same temperature, the sun on your skin even, there's just more heat there. It's almost like the atmosphere has become depleted. It's thinner now, so more of that radiation is actually hitting your skin. And I've got proof of that because I have a radiation detector built into my watch. I mean, it's a high-end military-grade watch. You can pick one up at MTN Special Ops, and everywhere I go, I can see what the radiation levels are. And just over the past 3 years, they've literally doubled in my area out here in San Antonio, Texas. So it's very interesting. I'm wondering if the chemtrails might have something to do with that. But the sun also seems more extreme now. So,
well,
what is your thoughts on that?
Good points. Very good points. let me comment on the EMP, and let me comment on the sun. First of all, actually, if you go to the book of Revelation, the Revelation indicates that the sun is going to be hotter at that time frame. Now, the EMP effect, Planet X has a massive tail. It's fantastically charged. It's magnetic. The tail has moons and rocks in it. Now, this can down aircraft and satellite when it passes. It can affect the electrical grid. Now, of course, NASA, JPL, and the other disinformation sources ignore this. Here are the facts. The Earth has a nickel and iron core. Now, this generates this magnetic field. However, the magnetosphere has large holes in it. The magnetosphere is a static shield. Now, under routine solar conditions, it protects the Earth from coronal mass ejections. But when Planet X arrives, we're no longer under routine solar conditions. Now, you look at Air France, for example. I think that was back in 2009, Air France 447. This is a little bit off topic, but really it's on topic because it's an excellent metaphor, an excellent visual type of illustration as to the power of Planet X. When Planet X hits, the utilities are going to be shut down for anywhere from 3 months on. There's going to be $5 trillion worth of damage to the electrical grid. But let's go back to Air France 447 back in 2009 to give you an example. There have been people that have postulated, these are very intelligent people, and it's just a theory, but they have postulated that that disappeared over the mid-Atlantic range, right in the middle of the ocean. Now, that's involved with the Earth's earthquakes. The EMP between the mid-Atlantic range and Planet X could have caused this destruction. And the same thing with Malaysian flight ME370. It may have flown into an EMP pulse. The flight path was highly irregular. That's indirect evidence. And this occurs when the North Pole of Planet X is pointed directly at the Earth during its approach. Magnetrons and electrons burned out through an EMP event. I think the cell phones of the passengers as well burned out. So none of the theories really answer in terms of those aircraft. All the questions are fully explained what happened that day. But it could be an indirect effect of the approach of Planet X. Now, also, you mentioned these chemtrails. Now, there's a site I just became aware of it recently called Geoengineering Watch. I think Dane.
Yeah, great guy.
Oh, you know him? Okay.
Yeah, I've talked to him before.
Oh, you've talked to him. Excellent. Well, you've probably heard the key phrase indigo skyfold and so forth, and I understand that contrails dissipate quickly, but not chemtrails. And I always, tell people, in terms of NSA, nothing is as it appears to be. Always consider the source and their agenda. You look at Ted Gunderson, that former FBI chief, and he said Congress should be investigating these chemtrails. And
yeah, that was back in '97. He actually came out and talked to Congress about it. Weather wars, chemtrails, everything.
Really, I didn't keep up too much with the chemtrails controversy, but it's likely what? Strontium, aluminum oxide, and so forth?
Barium salts, all sorts of other nanoparticulates. They were putting GMO, Ebola virus crap in there. I mean, it just depends on the day and the time and the location. But I do got to bring this up, too, because I've noticed for the past several days, the skies have been chemtrail-free. At least if they were doing it at nighttime when you couldn't see it because you didn't have the haze, you didn't see those nanoparticulates falling from the skies when they do the heavy chemtrail spraying. You can see with your polarized sunglasses on. So I'm wondering why, and I'm wondering if the chemtrails that they do have a part of trying to block out Nibiru if it's visible to the naked eye sometimes.
I think that's very possible. I think they're attempting every type of disinformation possible. For example, let's look at what happened recently. And let's give you a little history on this. You probably know a lot of this, but for your listeners, science admits quite a few points in favor of Planet X. Our solar system is surrounded by the Oort cloud, 50 to 200,000 AU astronomical units, Earth-Sun distances from our sun. And if our sun is part of a binary system, which it is, and you have a common center of mass, this can disturb the Oort cloud and send comets or whatever toward us. Now, science also admits an asteroid impact is absolutely responsible for the extinction of the dinosaurs about 65 million years ago in the Tunguska effect or event in Russia in 1908. I think that explosion had 1,000 times the power of the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima, flattened 80 million trees, 840 square miles. Now, here's the thing. Science admits a recently discovered dwarf planet named Sedna has an extra long and a rather unusual elliptical orbit around the sun. I think it's 76 to 900 AU. And Sedna's orbit is estimated 12,000 years. Mike Brown of Caltech said Sedna's location doesn't make any sense. Sedna shouldn't be there. There's no way to put Sedna where it is. It never comes close enough to be affected by the sun, but it never goes far enough to be affected by the stars. Now, this fellow Brown is part of a Caltech team that claims to have discovered the 9th planet earlier this year, in 2016. And as you know, Pluto's been demoted. It's no longer considered a planet. But Brown's calculations suggest Nemesis, or the 9th planet, whatever they want to call it, is 10 times the mass of Earth. Now, science also knows, as I mentioned, that binary star systems are very common in our galaxy, and red dwarfs are very common. They're the most common type of star in the galaxy. So the existence of Planet X, the Planet X system, is therefore quite in line with the current knowledge base. But to wrap it up, this so-called 9th planet, recently disclosed in January of this year by the NASA people, never a straight answer, is a combination, in my opinion, of information and disinformation. It's what we would call in the intel community a Bush League type of propaganda. My advice to anybody thinking about this or thinking about doing too much research on this, quote, discovery of the 9th planet, don't major on minors. I don't study their announcement too much or pay much attention to it. Now, the real Planet X is in the vicinity of Mars and fast approaching Earth. It has no direct relationship or indirect relationship to this recent discovery. And this so-called discovery is just one more piece of evidence, in my opinion, that the powers that be are running scared and making mistakes as they go.
Well, certainly making mistakes as they go sounds like a common theme for them, you know, and also you look at so much today as far as pollution and, you know, just the fracking that's going on around the world right now. There's so much oil that's available. They're running out of space to put it. And if those things go, you know, those fracking systems, and like, let's look at LA, for example, all the methane that's getting leaked out there. There's just this huge emergency. It's not really being talked about much now. It was a few weeks ago, but now it's hush hush. You know, who knows how many people are going to be affected by that. You've got these nuclear reactors next to fault lines. I think there's 55 nuclear reactors next to the Madrid fault line alone. You've got, you know, the San Andreas fault line, and you look at Fukushima and what happened out there and how much pollution to the environment from these nuclear active particulates that are just all over the place now. And I wonder what's going to happen, like you said, if there's just this giant blackout and if power isn't available to these nuclear facilities, or if there's an earthquake and some of these reactors get, you know, affected by it. How are they going to keep the rods cool? What happens if Carlsbad, New Mexico, where they've got just tons and tons of nuclear waste there? What happens if something goes out there? You know, what's next? How do people protect themselves? Do they even want to be protected, or would they be better off just dying quickly?
Well, very good points. You know, there's the fellow I'm sure you've heard of, J.R. Moore, the radio show, and he's interviewed some U.S. Navy veterans, and they were told the end results of all this, but they really weren't told the why of it, and he was told it on a discrete basis. You may have seen the U.S. Navy map of future America where the coasts are flooded and so forth. Well, now you know that the magnetic poles have been shifting towards Russia at maybe 40 miles an hour a year, but when Planet X arrives, the physical poles will shift. Now this will create some hyper-earthquakes, tsunamis, and the shifting of land masses. So if you want to look at a few different states, one thing people can do to protect themselves is simply be in the right location when it happens. Now there's a few states to avoid. And California is highly dangerous. It's composed of rock plates. Now when rock is compressed, it breaks. And you'll see the crumbling of rock, of course, as its mass goes upwards. Now the West Coast will have major catastrophic changes, synergistic proportions, tidal waves, high hurricane force winds, earthquakes on the fault lines, volcanic activity over the magma, forest fires caused by the what's in the tail of Planet X, and also caused by volcanic explosions, severe lightning storms. So it's highly dangerous. And I think the long-term danger is in riding out the shifts for those who are living near the boundaries of plates. Now, cities without mountains as a backdrop can just be washed out to sea. You'll have broken gas and water lines. San Francisco, it's on the San Andreas and other fault lines. A lot of the population will be trapped. Water will overflow the city. Survival will be minimal. California is not a good bet. Now, the area around Arizona, on the other hand, The Hoover Dam probably won't survive because of earthquake activity. And you'll have rivers flooding, and areas within rivers should probably be avoided. But you look at Phoenix and some of these main cities. Arizona has withstood many a pole shift. The area around Tucson is safe. Florida is another very dangerous state. Its highest elevation is 105 meters in the Panhandle. But as for Central and South Florida and the Keys, these parts can be devastated by a tide of water. Colorado, for example, is a safe area. The domestic division of the CIA is relocating to Colorado. That should give, viewers many clues right there. Right. Eastern Colorado, has descends into plains, has rivers. Some of these may be a port of safety. And of course, one of the safest parts of the country is the Ozarks, northern Arkansas, southern Missouri, average elevation close to 1,000 feet, self-sufficient water supply, agricultural land. They'll do well. They're also isolated from large metropolitan areas, and they're well enough inland to avoid flooding through, tidal waves. So it's part of the preparation is probably geographic. But I would expect when it hits, when you see this object in the sky, you'll have 1 to 2 days to accumulate all of the emergency food and water you can. I would accumulate at least a 3-month supply. Now, the strange thing is about this whole thing is that Congress could have done something about this electrical grid. It could solve it for $300, $400, $500 million. They've never done anything to harden it. The military has parts of their grid hardened, but the Congress has never done anything. And yet they know that the estimate of a 3-month downward collapse the U.S. electrical grid will cost the nation in excess of $5 trillion. So I don't understand the thinking, but this is Congress, so that's it.
I think they're probably trying to protect themselves as well. Maybe they are being offered a nice, 1-bedroom apartment, about 15 stories underground, and they'll be okay. They won't have to worry about anything during the catastrophe. But, how long is this going to last?
Well, the effects could last as long as the electrical grid is down. When the electrical grid is down, as you know, you'll have a certain percentage of automobiles and trucks that will simply fail because of the EMP pulse. The EMP pulse, for your listeners who maybe are not too familiar with it basically can occur several ways. One way it can occur is through a nuclear explosion. For example, if North Korea were to have a rogue container ship or something like that, and they were outside the continental United States, or Russia had a drone submarine, and they exploded a nuclear weapon of a certain tonnage, a certain blast radius, 250 miles above Kansas City, it would basically knock out 99% of our electrical grid, as well as part of Mexico and Canada. But an EMP effect from the sun, a solar flare, can do that as well. And let me explain a little bit about solar flares. The biggest flares to date are called X-class flares. And now Y-class exists, but they're off the charts. Now, as I mentioned, the Earth is surrounded by the
So that was a rather abrupt ending to that. Started abruptly also, but lots of information in there. So what I'll do, I'll come back in a third episode and give my own thoughts and opinions and what a strategy that the Lord has already told us about, that He wants us to follow. So this is Rock Our World with Neil Buchanan, signing out.